Hey, how's it going, guys? My name is Will Wilson, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the communication accommodation theory. Today I'm going to be talking about what it is, why it's important, give examples, and how you can use this anywhere you go, including in a professional setting. According to businesstopia.net, the communication accommodation theory is related to social identity theory and is about people adjusting to communicate by minimizing social differences. The theory was developed by Howard Giles, a professor teaching communication at the University of California in 1971. The theory is an advancement of speech adjustment theory, talking about psychological concepts on dynamics of speech. The theory talks about people wanting to portray their positive identity to others. They tend to match their own vocabulary, accent, and cadence as other interactants. For example, people adopt slang that their friends use to fit in. People talk differently using different words and gestures according to the different groups of people, like the elderly, children, women, men, teens, rich, poor, powerful, weak, etc. The accommodation process is guided by culture and norms. The major assumption of communication accommodation theory is that interactants have similarities and differences which can be in their speech, their gestures, and behavior based on their experiences and culture. Communication is evaluated and accommodation is done according to the evaluation. Communication also establishes social status, as people tend to adopt the communication behavior of people who are higher in social status than theirs. The article continues to go on about 11 essential features of the communication accommodation theory. And it goes as this. Number one, people tend to match the way they talk to the way listeners talk. 2, it can be conscious or unconscious. 3, accent, speed, vocabulary, cadence, gestures are some accommodations done. 4, it is done to fit in a group or social status. 5, it shows agreement, belonging, and affinity. 6, people only show their positive sides while communicating. 7, there are other concepts like counter-accommodation, under-accommodation, and over-accommodation, which affects the effects of communication accommodation theory. 8, it can either be beneficial or unfavorable. 9, it includes psychological, social, and linguistic behavior of interactants. 10, some strategies used are approximation, interpersonal control, interoperability, etc. And finally, 11, it includes interpersonal as well as intergroup factors affecting communication. Now, like every other theory, it comes with criticisms. And the article continues on with 7 criticisms of the communication accommodation theory. Number 1, people who realize communication accommodation of the other person can take the person as fake or pretentious. However, if not realized, it makes people comfortable in the interaction, increases their being fond of you. Number 2, it can also be taken as mockery. Number 3, converging people show power than what they really possess, which can also make them seem intimidating. Number 4, divergence can create barriers in communication as distance is maintained between people when somebody is taken as inferior. Number 5, differences between convergence and divergence are sometimes blurred by situations. 6, both parties involved in communication are always assumed to be rational and there are no conflicts between them. 7, very few researches have been done on this subject. Now, to put it into other words, basically the communication accommodation theory, it's people either align or differentiate with others based on similarity or belonging. In the theory, it talks about 2 ways people do this. Convergence, which is adapting to others to better connection, or the opposite, divergence, differentiate from others to increase distance. Knowing these terms and being able to distinguish between them are essential to be able to master this theory and to be able to effectively utilize this theory to your advantage. Now, let's see some examples of these in action. Hey, how you doing?
Hello, Chad. How are you?
I'm lit. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I actually just got done with my biology homework. I find it extremely intriguing. Did you know that science proved that at the time you wake up, the excess fluids, which are released within your spinal discs, make you almost half an inch taller? But as the day progresses, we have to deal with the stress of standing, and the disc compresses and fluids seep in, making you lose that height of yours.
I don't even know what that means, dog. I'm just trying to get lit with my bros. Are you trying to get lit?
I think.
Pause. This was clearly awkward for both parties and a great example of divergence, or what not to do. Miley being the intelligent one, being well spoken, and talking to Chad over here, using slang, no formality, and neither of the parties know anything about the communication accommodation theory. Recipe for disaster. And all that's going to do is make both parties uncomfortable and distance from each other. Now, let's take a look at an example of Chad now knowing about the communication accommodation theory and him and let's see how he does in a professional setting. All right, bro, you got this. Super important interview. It's going to be lit. Ooh, don't say that in the interview. Remember, communication accommodation theory. Adapt to a professional setting. Oh, hi, how's it going, Miss McGlynn? How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking. Have a seat.
Oh, wow. I noticed you have a lot of Halloween decorations. Are you a big fan of the season?
Well, yes. Ever since I was a kid, I've grown up with Halloween being my favorite holiday.
Wow, me too. I love Halloween, and even to this day, I'll still go trick-or-treating. Did you know that the earliest known reference to the phrase trick-or-treat in North America is from 1927 in Alberta, Canada?
Oh, wow. I actually didn't know that. That's really interesting. Looks like you know your stuff.
I try. Right here, you can see a perfect example of convergence and how we can correctly use the communication accommodation theory in a professional setting. While we see Chad is normally used to using slang with his friends, he was able to correctly converge to his new surrounding in a professional setting and actually develop rapport. Whether or not Chad is actually the smartest or the sharpest tool in the shed, because of his newfound knowledge of the communication accommodation theory, it led him to start off strong with right from the beginning of the interview, and most likely will increase his chances of actually getting the job in the interview. What we can take from these examples and what I've explained here is how significant the use of convergence and divergence can be, not only in a professional setting, but in our day-to-day lives. Hopefully after this video, you'll have a better understanding of what the communication accommodation theory is, why it's important, and how you can utilize it to your advantage.